Welcome to part 2 of Consequences of Modern Agriculture lecture for plants, humans, and the environment. So one of the main inputs on an industrial farm is chemicals. Because modern farms are so large and planted as a monoculture, there's only a single crop over a large area, more chemicals are needed. Pests and diseases can easily and quickly multiply given an abundant food or host source of a monoculture. It's kind of like an all-you-can-eat buffet for them. This requires the use of increasing amounts and types of insecticides and fungicides and herbicides. Herbicides are used to kill weeds and keep it as a monoculture. The pesticides also have the effect of killing everything else that lives in the soil. Soil is teeming with organisms that break down organic material into nutrients for plants. Without them doing that, without those organisms there, then fertilizer has to be added to feed the crop. Planting a single crop year after year in the same soil will also deplete the nutrients of the soil. This map shows the total pesticides applied per acre of cropland per state. An estimated 1 billion pounds of pesticides are applied in the U.S. each year. This includes all land, though, including agriculture. This map shows application of two of the most common herbicides between 1990 and 1991. Atrazine is a commonly used chemical and is found in about 94% of U.S. drinking water that's tested by the U.S. Department of Agriculture. This map shows the likelihood that atrazine will exceed drinking water standards set by the Environmental Protection Agency. D-ethylatrazine is a breakdown product of atrazine, and together they have increased toxicity, again with agricultural areas showing greatest probability. One thing to understand about these kinds of chemicals is that when they are applied to land, it can take time before they appear in well water, drinking water. As you can see, it could take many decades. This is because pesticides tend to be what's called persistent organic pollutants, or POPs. The most well-known POPs are PCBs, DDT, and dioxins. POPs are problematic for a few reasons. First, they are persistent. They stay around for a long time. Second, they exist in a volatile gaseous state or can attach to airborne dust particles and move around. Third, they bioaccumulate, which means that the concentration of the chemical increases as it is moved up the food chain. We can use DDT as an example to demonstrate each of these. This chart shows the DDT concentration remaining in fish that were tested well after the chemical was no longer used. Because of the dangerous effects of DDT, it was banned in the US in 1972, but is still found in the environment much later. Today, DDT breakdown products were found in the blood of 99% of people that were tested by the US Center for Disease Control. This graph shows the presence of DDT and a derivative of DDT, which is DDE, in breast milk around the world, and it shows human exposure. POPs, persistent organic pollutants like DDT, cause reproductive, developmental, behavioral, neurologic, endocrine, and immunologic effects in people. For example, researchers tested developmental delays in children with pesticide exposure. These are drawings done by preschoolers that were not exposed to pesticides, the drawings on the left, compared to preschoolers that were exposed, the two drawings on the right. And there's evidence that the preschoolers exposed to pesticides had developmental disabilities. Although those in direct contact are most at risk, exposure can also come from very far away. Air and ocean currents can carry substances great distances, and POPs can often travel far because they are so persistent. As early as 1970, DDT was first detected in the blubber of Arctic seals. Then it was soon found in many other animals that lived in areas that were thought to be uncontaminated. The ability of DDT to bioaccumulate in animal tissue became widely known after the effect it had on bald eagle populations in the 1960s. It caused their their eggshells to thin so much that the chicks couldn't hatch. The population quickly began to decline dramatically, but then it recovered fantastically immediately after DDT was banned, several years. So bioaccumulation has been identified in places as far away as the Arctic. In a 1997 study, it was found that some caribou in Canada's Northwest Territories had as much as 10 times the levels of a POP as the lichen that they ate. Chemical levels in the wolves that fed on the caribou were then magnified nearly 60 times as much as the lichen. Another consequence of monoculture planting is the effect on the biology of the pests. Pest populations will eventually evolve resistance to the chemicals that are used to kill them. Imagine that you have a pest population, as represented here by these happy circles. Then you spray an insecticide. This will kill most of the individuals, but not all of them. Those that survived are genetically resistant to that chemical. They will produce offspring, and the resurgent population will, from that point on, be resistant to the chemical. A new chemical will need to be developed, or a stronger chemical, or a mix of chemicals will have to be applied. This cycle leads to increasing toxicity in the environment. There is also an impact on the food supply in terms of crop diversity and food security. Over time, farmers were selecting seeds for a variety of crop characteristics. Today, crops are planted for consistency. Factors such as shelf life, ease of transport, whether it's going to bruise or otherwise look bad before it gets to the market, and uniform size for compatibility with machinery and also for consumer preference are important today. Things like nutrition or even taste are not the goal. But the problem with that is similar to the problem with pest resistance, except it's the opposite. Without enough genetic diversity, crops won't be able to resist environmental stress, or we won't be able to develop new crop breeds in response to environmental changes or even health concerns, for example, allergies to foods. We are essentially limiting our food options for the future. Agricultural biodiversity has decreased by 80 to 90% over only 80 years, between 1903 and 1983, for most of the common crop varieties. And this loss of genetic diversity will lead to less food security. Diets of agricultural societies are currently already fairly limited. Corn, wheat, and rice provide more than 50% of the calories consumed worldwide, and about 2/3 of the world relies primarily on only these crops. Only about 9 crops account for over 3/4 of the plants consumed by people. Aside from overall declines in crop diversity, modern agriculture has shifted to reliance on a particular kind of seed called a high-yield variety seed. These seeds are designed to be more productive and perform best when planted in large monocultures. Whereas traditional farmers practiced artificial selection to modify their crops, high-yield variety seeds are the result of intensive crossbreeding. Crossbreeding for high-yield variety seeds differs from artificial selection because it is a controlled exchange of genetic material to produce offspring with desired characteristics. It happens with advanced techniques in a science lab, typically breeding species that are only distantly related. In contrast to what happens with artificial selection, the offspring of intensive crossbreeding would not be found in the wild. One of the consequences of this technique is that the offspring seeds are sterile. They are referred to as hybrids. That means that the seeds produced by the plants grown with high-yield variety seeds can't be saved by the farmer and planted the next year. This makes it necessary for the farmer to continually purchase seeds and contributes to the cost of farmer inputs and farmer debt. These seeds also often require a suite of chemicals to be productive or possibly even to germinate, further increasing inputs needed by the farmer. And this brings us to the last point we will address, which involves the agriculture industry itself. Because food production has become so consolidated, there is concern that the world's food supply is being controlled by only a few companies, making global food security vulnerable. This is the case for seed producers. You can see here that only a handful of companies own most of the seed production. The largest are actually chemical companies, so it's actually not food producers who are providing our seeds, it's chemical companies with the goal of increasing sales of chemicals, which are the fertilizers and pesticides. The consolidation has also happened for food and other consumer products as well. This is maybe most evident in the meat industry, where the 4 largest corporations control more than 80% of the meat market. That's 51% of chicken, 65% of hog, and 85% of beef production today, compared to only 18%, 34%, and 36% in 1980. Farming and agriculture has experienced such commercial growth that we now refer to food production and associated industries as agribusiness. These are multi-billion-dollar companies that not only determine global food markets, but also vastly influence global and domestic economies and politics. And that concludes the lecture for consequences of modern agriculture.